Brian, I was talking to a farmer in central South Dakota, and he's commonly thought of as one of the best farmers in his area. You know, the extreme western Corn Belt that he was shooting for.
That's not even the Corn Belt. That's way past the Corn Belt.
Okay, whatever. We like to think that we're in the Corn Belt. But anyway, he was shooting for 150 bushel corn. His neighbors thought, man, he's nuts. He's always putting on way too much fertilizer. There's no way he's going to get it. Well, this year it paid off. He got 190 bushel average dry corn. Fantastic on his farm.
That's a lot of corn.
But the problem is he's thinking, man, I was doing so good on my fertilizer, I was getting things built up. Now I robbed all that extra fertilizer to make 190 bushel corn. What do I do? I'm sitting out there with nothing to start with.
Well, that's a real tough debate. So yes, we always want to get higher yields, but the problem with higher yields is now you have these fertilizer issues. You've robbed some out of your soil. What are you going to do to replace that? And do you really need to replace that? So my first suggestion in this particular case is I'd run out and do some soil tests. Let's see what's still left out there. Maybe there's enough that we're not that worried about it. We can kind of continue with our normal fertilizer program. The other thing is you got to be realistic. In central South Dakota, are you going to have 190 bushel corn again this next year? I seriously doubt it. The odds are against you. There's probably only a 10% chance that's going to happen. Now, maybe if you get your ground built up and everything goes your way, you can improve your odds a little bit, but the problem in central South Dakota is you have lots of heat, low humidity, and not a lot of rainfall. All those things are not real great for corn production.
So the question comes on nutrients. Where do you start? What nutrients are the right ones to be adding? And if I'm adding nutrients out there, are they even going to be available for my crop, or am I just dumping a bunch of extra money out there that I'm never going to get payback on? Now, when Brian and I were growing up, our dad always told us that, you know, putting more fertilizer on your soil is like putting money in the bank. You may not get a great return on your investment. You may not get it this year or anything, but someday you're going to need it and it's going to be out there. So really long term, it isn't a bad idea at all to have a little extra fertility out there. The problem is fertility is kind of expensive, so you really can't get carried away.
Well, a lot of times in these types of situations, what we're going to recommend to a guy is dry fertilizer is the best way to build an overall soil profile. Liquid fertilizer is going to give you the best availability in year one. So the other problem that we haven't mentioned so far is a lot of corn harvest occurred so late in much of the Corn Belt or beyond the Corn Belt, like this guy is in central South Dakota, that the guys just didn't get their fertilizer out in the fall. Okay, if you're going to go out there with dry fertilizer in the spring, and let's say you're planting a crop like corn that needs its nutrients really early in the year, is a lot of that fertilizer going to be available in central South Dakota where you don't get rain? No way, not even close. It might be available late in the summer for your beans, but more likely a lot of that P&K that you put out this spring will be available the next spring for next year's crop. So if you're going to go out and think that, oh, I'm just going to put lots of dry fertilizer on this spring, it'll be great for my corn, no way. You've got to at least supplement that with some liquid fertilizer, some stuff that's readily available right now today.
Well, I agree completely. If you didn't get your fertilizer on last fall, you don't have to worry. I mean, the world isn't going to come to the end or anything, but you do need to start switching up how you're going to do your fertilizer. Broadcasting dry is not going to be the best answer for you this spring if you want to have high yields this year. You need to look at some liquid, and then where are you going to place that liquid? Ideally, we'd like to place that liquid in a band right beneath the row, probably 6 or 8 inches deep, but we are going to need to put some of that in the furrow. Some of it's going to have to be pop-up this year because we probably aren't going to get a lot of 6 or 8 inch deep strip till type applications done this spring. It's just not going to happen. We had heavy snowfall across much of the Corn Belt, as I would call it, and it's just not going to dry out in time this spring for us to do it. By the time the soil dries out and everything's fit, we need to be planting. We can't waste another couple of weeks trying to get on a whole bunch of fertilizer. So you are going to need to do some in the furrow. It's important to look at which fertilizer is not going to hurt you in terms of early growth to get that job done.
Okay, so to wind this thing up, basically what I would tell a farmer like this is, if you had 190 bushel corn, let's look specifically at how much your crop removed. If you just took the grain off the field, left all the stover out there. A 200 bushel corn crop is going to take 76 pounds of phosphate, 60 pounds of K2O potassium. Obviously, it removes a bunch of nitrogen, but nitrogen you need to replace every year. Don't forget, too, when you take a big crop off, it's also going to remove a bunch of sulfur, micronutrients, and some other plant nutrients out there. at least on our farm, we try to replace what we have removed. So it might not be enough for our yield goal the next year, but if nothing else, I at least want to replace what I removed. That's where I would start with this whole thing after I've got my soil test done.
Well, fertilizer is one thing, but we can't forget about weed control. We'll show you how to kill our weed of the week coming up next.